Okay, so Jesus, of course, it's the day after the feeding of the 5,000. He's in the synagogue at Capernaum, and he's teaching the people about himself. And it's all centered around bread. And we've talked about how Jesus is the living bread and other things about bread. But now we're getting to the point where that he talks about his body being broken. And so this is the part about the broken bread. And I think we stopped off here, or at least right around here yesterday. So in verses 51 through 59, Jesus says this: I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. So he's talking about his substitutionary death on the cross here. The Jews then disputed among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? So Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever feeds on my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. Whoever feeds on my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever feeds on me, he also will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like the bread the fathers ate, talking about the manna, and died. Whoever feeds on this bread will live forever. Jesus said these things in the synagogue as he taught at Capernaum. So as we mentioned yesterday, Jesus is talking about his death on the cross. When he's talking about that his flesh and his blood will bring life, and that you have to eat of that and drink of that in order to have life as well. And I don't think the people listening could have grasped that, and they were probably weirded out about it a little bit. But what he's talking about is what Paul says in Galatians, I think. I've been crucified with Christ, therefore I no longer live. Jesus Christ lives in me. The life I live now, I live to the Father. So that's the idea that in some way we can't fully understand. When Jesus was crucified, we were crucified. And when Jesus was raised, we were raised. Now, we weren't crucified physically, right? But we died to sin and we raised to new life. That's what salvation is, dying to sin and being raised to new life. That's what baptism, we go down and die, and then we come up a new creature, and that's what it's symbolizing, is our death to sin and our walking in new life. The people, however, couldn't understand this. And had a pretty visceral reaction, as you can imagine, if you were hearing this at that time. And I'm sure their reaction was very strong, as we can see here. But the point is clear, that Jesus is saying, I'm going to go to the cross, I'm going to die to pay for your sins, and then I'm going to rise from the dead so that you can live forever as well. And that's the point of the whole thing. If we distill it down to its most salient point. So the people see this, it refers to Christ's sacrifice on the cross. And he supplies everlasting life to all who partake in faith. Trust Christ, we have eternal life as well. So let's talk a little bit about the results. Many people forsake him. At this point, and I told you to think about what the people were thinking as I read this yesterday. And they were kind of grossed out by it, and they couldn't understand it. And so a lot of people are like, I'm out. I'm not following this guy. He's crazy. And so they couldn't understand that statement, and they couldn't reconcile what Jesus was saying with what they understood of who he was. And they don't understand what this whole dying thing is about because it hasn't happened yet, right? He's talking about a future event. And when he says, I'm going to die, they had a belief that Messiah would never die. So he can't be Messiah. If he's going to die, he can't be Messiah. Or they just didn't understand it completely. And I think that's possibly the case. So many people leave. When many of his disciples, now, when we say they're using that word disciples there, it's the people that follow Jesus and to listen to him teach. He had the 12, who were the closest to him, but then there were a lot of other people that followed Jesus around from time to time to hear what he had to say. If he was in Jerusalem, oh, Jesus is in Jerusalem, let's go hear what he's going to say. Let's see if he gets in trouble. And some of them were just curious. Some of them, I think, were probably interested. But a lot of those, not the 12, then leave. When his disciples heard it, they said, this is a hard saying. Who can listen to it? Basically, they're saying, this doesn't make sense. I can't understand what they're saying, what he's talking about. And I don't want to eat anybody's flesh, drink anybody's blood. And so it really confused them. But Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples were grumbling about this, again, not the 12, said to them, do you take offense at this? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? Okay, so what is he saying there? Here's what he's saying. Does this offend you? Are you offended by what I've just said? Are you taken aback by my saying you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood? Then you're going to have a real problem when I die and I ascend to heaven. So what he's saying is, what if you saw, and he did ascend to heaven, right? And he's saying he ascended to where he was before. Where was he before? He was in heaven. And they couldn't understand that as well. So I don't think that actually helped them want to stay disciples of Jesus. So the majority of them walked away from Jesus. It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh is no help at all. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. But there are some of you who do not believe, for Jesus knew from the beginning who those were who did not believe and who it was who would betray him. And he said, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted by him by the Father. After this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. So that's what the majority of the people did. But his 12 disciples stay with him, at least for now. Judas is still among them. So the 12 stay with him. So when Jesus asked his disciples, if they wanted to leave too, Peter spoke up. And I love picturing this. I think this happened often. Like Peter was like the spokesperson. Peter was like the guy who was always ready with an answer. I don't know if you're in some classes and the teacher asks a question and there's the hand up guy, right? Or gal that's always answering the questions and everybody else is going, that means I don't have to answer, right? I think Peter was that guy. I think Peter was the guy that was willing to speak up. It gave him a little bit of, Peter's my favorite disciple. I have an affinity for Peter because I see myself in him. So he had kind of foot and mouth disease, that he'd speak first and then think, and then he'd be like, oh, yeah. But in this case, when he spoke rightly. And so Jesus turns to them and says, are you going to leave too? And what I picture is the disciples all going, I kind of want to leave, but I don't know what to say. And then Peter speaks up. So Jesus said to them, do you want to go away as well? Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One. Jesus answered them, did I not choose you, the 12, and yet one of you is a devil? He spoke of Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for he, one of the 12, was betrayed. These are beautiful words from Peter, and I don't think his disciples understood really Also, the difference between the 12 and the rest of those disciples is that they had come to know Jesus and trust Jesus. So that if Jesus said something they didn't understand, they thought, well, we can trust him. Even though we don't understand this, we can trust him. And that is an important lesson for us to learn. Because over the course of your life, there will be many times when you're like, what are you doing? Do you even know what's going on down here? Do you even know what's happening in my life? And we have to know Christ well enough to know, excuse me, that we can trust him. You did great. And we have those times when we don't understand what's happening in our lives. Um, we don't think God knows what he's doing. I've had a number of those times in my life. And we cry out to God. What we need then is to have an understanding to know God well enough that we know we can trust him. And that's where the disciples were with Jesus. Even though he said something that they're like, I don't get this, and I think it's pretty weird. It's kind of weirding me out. But I know I can trust him. And so I'm going to stick around. The rest of the disciples didn't have that understanding of Jesus because they weren't there to find out who Jesus was. They weren't there to learn from Jesus. They were there to get free food or miracles or something like that. What could they get from Jesus, not what they could learn from Jesus. And so the 12 stayed with him. And this is what identifies a true follower of Christ. That they stay faithful to Christ even in the difficult times. So let's talk a little bit about why people follow Christ. Some people follow Christ because of the miracles. Some people follow Christ for what they can get from him. And as soon as God says no, then they're out. Give it to me now. When I have a pet, it's not a pet peeve. I take issue with people that say God didn't answer my prayer. When you pray for something and it doesn't happen, God didn't answer my prayer. Yes, he did. He said no. Caesar, if the next time you ask if you can go get a drink of water or something, and I said no, you wouldn't look at me and go, "Are you going to answer my question?" No, I answered it, didn't I? I said no, and so God says no, and sometimes when God says no, people get angry at God, and people don't understand, and sometimes their faith is is hurt by that. So God's not always going to give us everything we want, but He knows what's best. And again, if we have a relationship with Him, we trust Him. We say, okay, I don't understand why this is happening, but I know I can trust you. So some were there just to see the signs, to see the miracle, and then some follow because of the multitudes. What happens if, like, let's say you're at you're in the classroom and you hear something going on out in the chapel area, and we look out and there's 30 people around. Let's say just right straight out here by the lockers, and there's 30 people gathered by the lockers. What happens? Right? Right? What is there? A fight? What's happening on there? Is someone hurt? Is someone faint? You want to know what's happening. Crowds draw crowds. Anywhere there's a crowd, people are like, oh, I think I want to go. Or somebody might say, hey, you want to go to this movie? No, and then three people say, yeah, I want to go. Okay, I'll go too. Right? Crowds draw crowds, and so some just come because other people are coming. Because, well, I guess I'll try it too. So lifting up his eyes then and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we going to find bread to feed these people?" So as the crowds came, more people were like, "Oh, I wonder what's going on over there," and followed. Some came for the meal, for what they could get out of Jesus, and what he could provide for them physically. The other thing that can happen, especially at a Christian school, is when a lot of people, let's take a chapel that's been especially moving, and it ends up, the chapels we've had that end up lasting much longer. I think some of those people are probably really sincere and really needing to hear from God, but I think some of those people are, and it may be sort of I don't really, am not really moved by this, but I'm gonna fake it because and that can happen too. That's kind of the drawing of the multitudes. Some come for the meal, and maybe only want to come to Jesus when something special is going on or something's convenient. I don't understand this next one because of the money. I don't know if you're going to go into ministry, so I don't even understand that one. But Judas was in it for the money because he kept the money bag and he pilfered from it. So Judas probably stuck around for the money, but I'm not sure that's so true today. There's really only one reason that we should come to Christ. There's really only one reason why we should follow Christ faithfully, and it's because He's the Master. He's the only one worthy of our allegiance. So, just to end this, I want to echo again Peter's words. Um, Joshua said this when he was dividing the land for the people of Israel. He said this as they came into the promised land. He said, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods in the lands, the gods of your forefathers, or the gods in the land where you're now living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And every person has that choice. You have that choice. You can choose to serve whomever or whatever you want. And that might be serving money or fame or family or any number of things. And it's not always bad things. We can choose to serve something that's a good thing. But when a good thing becomes an ultimate thing, it becomes a bad thing, it becomes a God thing. I'm just going to give you one quick example. Things that happened in a weekend that really brought this thing home to me. And I tell this story in other times as well. But first, I'm just going to use one of them. So we were looking at my mom and her best friend and I were going to look at a house that her best friend thought she might want to buy. And as we're coming back on this country road west of Omaha, there's all these vans in a parking lot, and there's this bar, and it says fly ball tournament. There's a sign that says fly ball tournament. Anybody know what a fly ball tournament is? Okay, So a flyball tournament is a sporting event for dogs. And what it is it's this, that like in the barn there's this running track, like from here from this side of the room to that side of the room. And they're each in their own tracks, and when the door goes up, they go flying down to the other side, and at the end there's this board. And they put their paws on the board, and when they put their paws on the board, a tennis ball flies out, they grab it in their mouth, and they run back. And so it's like track and field for dogs. And the winning dog gets whatever. Well, I don't know what the dog gets, but the owners get money from this, right? So we're at this flight, and it was great fun. And we had a golden retriever at the time, and I'm like, oh, when she was younger, she would have loved to do this, right? But I go outside, and I see all these vans, like really, really expensive vans, that have all been converted to be a flyball palace for their dog. Like they had, the only purpose for these vehicles was so the dog could play flyball. That was it. And I'm like, you probably paid 50 grand. You'll never make back the money in flyball results to pay for this van. Everybody turns their life over to something. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, everybody turns their life over to something. And what Peter is saying, I don't want to turn my life over to flyball or to sports or to relationships with other people. I want to turn my life over to Lord, to whom shall we go? You alone have the words of eternal life. And so that's the teaching. And for most people, it's an I'm out situation, because they can't. They want too much to live. And that's true of all of us. We want to, when a little kid looks up at you, and when you're babysitting or something like that, and you ask them to do something they don't want to. And have you ever had a kid say this to you? You're not the boss of me, right? The truth is, we all want to be our own boss. Has Ms. Riker said that to you? You're not the boss of me when you're taken care of? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So all of us want to be our own boss. But the truth is, we have a boss. And only God has authority to be our boss. We don't even have our own authority. So yeah, Jesus has this teaching that upsets people, and they leave. But Peter knew that only Jesus could give him eternal life, and so he stuck on instead of going away. So that's it for today. You know what? I'll keep the classes together. We'll do that quiz tomorrow, first thing, and then you can chat through it.